The Canadian Rockies have a way of making you feel small. That night, driving through the endless darkness with only my headlights cutting through the thick mountain air, I felt smaller than ever. The clock on my dashboard read 2:17 a.m., and I hadn't seen another car for at least an hour. The small town I'd passed through, barely more than a collection of buildings and a gas station, was now far behind me. The darkness ahead seemed absolute, the kind that makes you question whether anything exists beyond your headlights' reach. My bladder had been complaining for the last 20 miles, and the coffee I'd grabbed at that last gas station wasn't helping. I'd missed the rest stop sign in the darkness, realizing too late that it was the last one for the next 100 kilometers. The highway stretched empty in both directions, a black ribbon cutting through the wilderness. I pulled over, the gravel crunching under my tires. The moment I killed the engine, the silence hit me. That deep mountain silence that feels almost alive. My headlights stayed on, more for comfort than necessity. The beam caught the edge of the tree line, creating strange shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. The air was crisp, carrying that distinct mountain chill that seeps into your bones. Standing there, taking care of business, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The darkness beyond the trees seemed to pulse with something ancient and aware. I pulled out my cigarettes, telling myself the unease was just my imagination. The first drag of my cigarette was just starting to calm my nerves when I saw it. A movement in the darkness that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks, the way shadows can dance when you've been driving too long. But then the figure emerged from the tree line, unmistakably human. In that moment, my mind raced through every horror movie I'd ever seen, every campfire story about mountain murders and wilderness disappearances. The figure moved with purpose, heading straight toward my car. My heart pounding, I made my way back to the driver's door, trying to appear calm, while every instinct screamed at me to jump in and floor it. The keys were already in my hand, my fingers finding them without looking down. Inside my car, with the doors locked, I felt a false sense of security. The figure drew closer, and in my headlights, I could now make out more details. A man, probably in his 40s, wearing what looked like casual hiking clothes. His face was gaunt, his eyes holding something that made my stomach turn. My cigarette trembled slightly between my fingers as I watched him approach. The mountain darkness pressed against my windows like a living thing, and the silence seemed to grow thicker with each step he took. When he knocked on my passenger window, the sound was so normal, so civilized. It felt out of place in this wilderness setting. My window cracked open just enough to hear him, letting in the cold mountain air and his desperate words. "I need you to call the cops." His voice carried the weight of someone who had walked to the edge and looked over. When he told me about his planned suicide, about the kitchen knife, about his daughters, I felt the world shift. This wasn't a horror story anymore. It was something far more real and far more terrifying. The knife glinted in my headlights when he showed it to me. A simple kitchen knife, the kind you'd use to cut vegetables for dinner. But out here in the darkness of the Rockies, it carried the weight of all his pain and desperation. I kept my voice steady as I suggested he place the knife on the ground. Inside, my mind was racing, trying to figure out how to handle this situation. One wrong word could send him back into those woods, this time to finish what he'd started. My phone showed 2 bars of service, a miracle in these mountains. As I dialed emergency services, I watched him through the window. He stood there crying quietly, looking smaller now without the knife. The dispatcher's voice crackled through, professional and distant. While I explained the situation and gave our location as best I couldn't help but think about the strange paths that had brought us both to this moment. If I hadn't missed that rest stop, if I hadn't needed that cigarette, if he had walked out of the woods just 5 minutes later, the dispatcher assured me help was coming, but out here in the vast wilderness, coming could mean many things. We had no choice but to wait, 2 strangers connected by chance and darkness. Time moves differently when you're waiting for help in the middle of nowhere. The man sat down on the gravel, his back against my car's passenger side. I kept the engine running, both for warmth and reassurance. We talked through the cracked window, He told me about his daughters, 2 girls, 8 and 11. He described their smile, their laugh, how the younger one had just learned to ride a bike. With each word, I could see him pulling himself back from the edge he'd been standing on. The stars above were incredible, the kind of view you only get in places far from city lights. We both looked up at them, sharing a moment of silence that felt more meaningful than any words. Sometimes the darkest path leads to the brightest light, I found myself saying. The words came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere I didn't even know existed. We talked about hope, about second chances, about the strange ways life can surprise you. He told me about his job loss, his divorce, the spiral that had led him into these woods with a kitchen knife and desperate intentions. But he also talked about his daughter's upcoming school play, about promises he wanted to keep, about tomorrows he suddenly wanted to see. In the distance, we could finally see the approaching lights of emergency vehicles, their red and blue cutting through the mountain darkness like hope made visible. The police cruisers arrived with their lights painting the mountainside in alternating red and blue. 2 RCMP officers approached cautiously, their training evident in every movement. The scene must have looked strange to them. A parked car on a deserted mountain highway, a man sitting on the ground, and me still inside my vehicle. They handled the situation with remarkable sensitivity. The female officer spoke to him with a gentle authority, while her partner gathered the knife and took notes. The man stood slowly, his shoulders straight now, as if the simple act of choosing to live had already begun to transform him. Before they had led him to their cruiser, he turned to my window one last time. "Thank you," he said, his voice stronger than before, "for stopping, for listening, for staying." After the police left, I sat in my car for a long time, watching the first hints of dawn creep over the mountain peaks. The cigarette I'd lit hours ago had burned out in my ashtray, never finished. The morning light revealed details of the landscape that the darkness had hidden. Steep cliffs, dense forests, the kind of wilderness that could swallow a person whole. I thought about how close it had been. A few minutes difference in timing, a different choice about where to stop, and his story might have ended very differently. The mountains kept their silence, ancient witnesses to countless human dramas played out in their shadows. As I started my engine to continue my journey, I noticed my hands were shaking slightly. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving behind a profound awareness of life's fragility. The next few days were a blur of normal activities that somehow felt different. Every kitchen knife I saw reminded me of that night. Every father with his daughters made me wonder about him. The mountains had shared something with me that changed how I saw the world. I couldn't stop thinking about his daughters, how close they had come to losing their father, about how the simple thought of them had been enough to pull him back from the edge. Love, I realized, could be as solid as the mountains themselves. How many other stories like ours had played out on these lonely roads? How many lives had been saved or lost in these shadows? A year after that night, I received another letter. He'd tracked down my address through the police station. Inside was an invitation to his daughter's graduation ceremony. "You're the reason she still has a father to watch her graduate," he wrote. I attended the ceremony, sitting quietly in the back. Watching him beam with pride as his daughter received her diploma, I felt the full weight of what had been saved that night. Not just one life, but all the moments that life would touch. All the future possibilities that would now have a chance to unfold. After the ceremony, his daughters hugged me, though they didn't know the full story of why their father called me his mountain angel. Some stories are better left in the shadows of those peaks. I've been driving trucks for 23 years now, and what I'm about to tell you happened during my 4th year on the job. I was doing the overnight Dallas to Memphis run, a route I'd done hundreds of times before. It was late October that time of year, when the darkness seems heavier somehow. The interstate was empty except for my rig and the occasional passenger car. My thermos was full of coffee, and the radio kept me company with late-night country songs. Around 2 a.m. just past Little Rock, I noticed something odd in my side mirror. A pair of headlights appeared out of nowhere, but they were different, more like a dull yellow glow than actual headlights. They stayed the same distance behind me, no matter how I varied my speed. The CB radio had been quiet all night, but suddenly it crackled to life. Northbound. Mile marker 127. You seen this? The voice was tense, unfamiliar. I keyed my mic to respond, but got only static. The yellow lights were still there, maintaining that exact same distance. Then my cab started getting cold. Not the normal chill of a fall night, but a bone-deep cold that seemed to seep in through the metal itself. The temperature gauge showed normal, but my breath was coming out in visible puffs. I'm not a superstitious man, but something felt wrong. Really wrong. That's when I noticed the mile markers. I'd passed 127 3 times in the last 15 minutes, even though I'd been driving straight north the whole time. The yellow lights finally started moving closer. In my mirror, I could now make out what looked like an old Peterbilt, probably from the 70s. It was all white, but not clean white, more like the color of old bones. The weirdest part? No driver was visible in the cab. My radio came alive again, this time with multiple voices overlapping. Don't let it get alongside you. Keep your speed steady. Whatever you do, don't stop. The voices sounded desperate, like they knew something I didn't. The temperature dropped even further. My window started frosting over, on the inside. The yellow lights were getting closer, and now I could hear something over the sound of my engine. It sounded like metal scraping on metal, but with an undertone that reminded me of screaming. Another voice came over the CB, older, calmer than the others. Listen carefully, son. You've got yourself a ghostwriter. There are rules. Break them, and you'll become another story truckers tell their rookies. The old-timer laid it out. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't look directly at it in your mirrors. And whatever you do, don't let it pass you. He said these things have been haunting the interstates since the first highways were built, taking drivers who don't know the rules. I wanted to dismiss it as nonsense, but the bone-white truck was now close enough that I could see through its windshield. The cab was empty, but somehow I felt watched. The yellow lights weren't headlights at all. They were more like eyes. The phantom truck started to move faster, trying to pull alongside me. Every time it got close, my engine would sputter and my gauges would go crazy. The CB radio cycled through stations by itself, catching fragments of conversations from what sounded like decades ago. I heard voices talking about gas prices from the 60s, discussions about routes that don't exist anymore, and distress calls from drivers long gone. Through it all, the old-timer's voice would break through. Keep steady. Don't let it pass. Remember the rules. The interstate ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, and the mile markers kept showing impossible numbers. My GPS was frozen on a location I'd passed hours ago, and my phone showed no signal. It was just me, my rig, and whatever this thing was behind me. The phantom truck was playing with me now. It would fall back, then surge forward, each time getting a little closer to my cab. The yellow eyes were brighter, and I swear I could hear laughter mixing with the metallic screaming. My fuel gauge started dropping faster than it should. The old-timer's voice crackled through again. It's trying to force you to stop. They all stop at the lost mile eventually. When I asked what the lost mile was, the radio went dead silent. That's when I noticed something even stranger. Other trucks started appearing in my mirrors, dozens of them. All different models from different eras. They were transparent, like projections, and all of them were burned, crushed, or mangled in some way. A ghostly convoy of accidents from years past. Each ghost truck triggered a memory that wasn't mine. I saw accidents, heard screams, felt the terror of final moments. These were the memories of drivers who hadn't survived their encounters. Each flash showed me how they broke the rules. One slowed down, another stopped to help what looked like a stranded motorist. A third tried to outrun it. The visions were overwhelming. I saw a driver from 83 who pulled over to check his tires, never to be seen again. A woman from 95 who thought she could lose it by taking an exit. The exit led right back to the same stretch of highway. A rookie from 76 who made the mistake of looking too long in his mirror. Through my windshield, I could see their faces reflected in the dark, each one a warning of what could happen if I failed to follow the rules. The old-timer's voice returned. They're showing you so you'll understand. This isn't your first warning, it's your last. My truck's clock had stopped making sense. It would jump forward hours, then back minutes. The sun should have been rising by now, but the darkness seemed to be getting deeper. The only constant was those yellow eyes in my mirror, getting closer with each passing mile. I tried to focus on driving, on keeping steady, but exhaustion was setting in. Coffee had no effect anymore. The cold had become so intense that my hands were stiff on the wheel. The ghost trucks in my mirrors formed a parade of tragedy, each one a reminder of what was at stake. Then I noticed something that made my blood run colder. Some of the ghost trucks were from the future, models that hadn't been built yet, carrying logos for companies that didn't exist. I was seeing not just the past victims, but the future ones too. The CB radio became a chorus of voices from different times. A driver from the 50s arguing about a baseball game that hadn't happened yet. A woman from 2030 warning about roads that hadn't been built. They were all talking at once, their voices overlapping in a maddening cacophony. Through the chaos, I started recognizing patterns. Each voice was trying to help in their own way, sharing what they'd learned in their final moments. The yellow eyes lie. Don't trust the exits. Keep moving forward, even when the road disappears. The old-timer's voice cut through again. You're approaching the lost mile. Whatever you see, whatever you hear, don't stop. The lost mile is where it makes its final move, where it shows you what you want most. The highway ahead started to change. The asphalt looked older, cracked and worn, like it hadn't been maintained in decades. The lane markings faded and reappeared in different patterns. Road signs showed destinations that didn't exist or had been gone for years. The ghost trucks started disappearing one by one, fading into the darkness, until only the bone-white Peterbilt remained. Its yellow eyes were now so bright, they left trails in my mirrors, like burning comets in the night sky. The metal screaming had become a constant wail. Then I saw it, a mile marker that simply read L. The lost mile. The old-timer's voice came through one last time. Remember, what you're about to see isn't real. Keep driving no matter what. As soon as I passed the L marker, the world changed. The highway transformed into a perfect road, smooth and empty. The night sky cleared, showing impossible stars and patterns I'd never seen. But that wasn't what almost made me stop. There on the shoulder was my father. He'd been a trucker too. Died in an accident when I was 15. He was standing next to his old rig, the same one from my childhood memories, waving me down. He looked exactly like I remembered him. And then don't trust it, I whispered to myself, gripping the wheel tighter. The phantom truck behind me was so close now I could feel its presence like a physical weight. Its yellow eyes illuminated my cab, making shadows dance across my dashboard. More visions appeared along the roadside. My mother, who I hadn't seen in years. My ex-wife holding our daughter, who I rarely get to visit. Each vision more tempting than the last, each one calling out to me to stop, to pull over, to just take a moment. The old Peterbilt was now right on my tail, its phantom bumper nearly touching my trailer. The temperature in my cab had dropped so low that ice was forming on the inside of my windshield. My engine was struggling, fighting against whatever force was trying to slow me down. I kept my foot steady on the accelerator, repeating the rules like a mantra. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't look too long. The visions became more desperate, more convincing, but I remembered the memories of those other drivers. I knew what happened to those who gave in. My engine started making sounds I'd never heard before. Warning lights flashed across my dashboard, and my radio cycled through frequencies so fast it became a single tone. The bone-white truck was now trying to pass me on both sides simultaneously, something that should have been impossible. The air in my cab grew so cold it hurt to breathe. Ice crystals formed in my beard, and my hands felt frozen to the wheel. The yellow eyes were everywhere now, reflected in every mirror, every window, even seeming to shine through the metal of my cab. That's when I saw the final vision. Myself, standing on the shoulder, waving frantically. My other self was mouthing words I couldn't hear, pointing ahead with desperate urgency. For a split second, I almost believed it, almost stopped, almost looked too long in the mirror. The L mile marker appeared again, but this time moving backward, like I was driving in reverse while going forward. The phantom truck's metal screaming had become deafening, drowning out even my own engine. The yellow eyes were now so bright they were blinding. My speedometer was spinning wildly, showing impossible speeds. The world outside my windows became a blur of mixed realities, past, present, and future, all bleeding together. The old-timer's voice came through one final time, barely audible through the chaos. "You're almost through. Whatever happens next, don't let go of the wheel. The dawn is coming." The phantom truck made its final move. It split into multiple versions of itself, surrounding my rig completely. Yellow eyes glared at me from every angle, and the metal screaming reached a pitch that made my windows vibrate. The cold was so intense, I could barely feel my body. Through my frosted windshield, I saw something impossible. The highway ahead split into dozens of different roads, each one leading to a different time. I could see routes from the 1950s, modern interstates, and even highways that looked like they belonged in the future. My truck's engine was dying, I could feel it. But then I noticed something, a faint line of purple on the horizon. Dawn was coming. The old timer had been right. I just had to hold on, keep moving forward, choose one road and stick to it. The bone-white Peterbilt was forcing me to choose a path. Each road showed a different outcome. Some where I made it home, others where I joined the ghostly convoy. The yellow eyes were hypnotic now, trying to pull my gaze into their depths. I remembered something my father used to say: the shortest distance between 2 points isn't always a straight line, but it's always the truth. Looking at all those branching roads, I suddenly understood. The phantom wasn't showing me choices. It was showing me doubts. I gripped the wheel tighter and kept my rig straight, ignoring all the alternate paths. The real road was there, hidden beneath all the illusions. The phantom truck screamed in fury as I made my choice. Everything happened at once. My engine roared back to life with a power I'd never felt before. The temperature in my cab started rising. The phantom truck's yellow eyes began to dim, and its metal screaming turned to a sound like breaking glass. The ghost roads vanished one by one until only the true highway remained. The bone-white Peterbilt made one last attempt to force me off course, but the growing dawn seemed to weaken it. Its white surface began to crack, yellow light pouring from the fissures. I watched in my mirrors as the phantom truck started to dissolve, pieces of it breaking off, vanishing into the morning light. The yellow eyes flickered one last time, and I heard a sound like 1,000 voices sighing at once. The sun broke over the horizon, and suddenly, everything was normal again. My engine purred smoothly, my gauges showed regular readings, and the temperature returned to normal. The mile markers made sense again, showing I was just outside Memphis. The CB radio crackled, and I heard regular chatter from other drivers starting their morning runs. No more voices from other times, no more desperate warnings. But then I heard the old timer one last time. "Well done, son. Remember this night. The phantom doesn't just take drivers, it tests them." When I finally pulled into the truck stop in Memphis, my log showed I'd made the run in exactly the normal time. There was no evidence of the impossible night I'd just lived through, except for one thing: a single patch of frost on my inside windshield that wouldn't melt. And if you're ever driving late at night and see yellow eyes in your mirror, well, now you know the rules. The Arizona sun was setting in my rearview mirror as I navigated my 18-wheeler through unfamiliar mountain roads. The flash flood that had taken out the main highway to Salt Lake City forced me onto this back road detour through lower Utah's wilderness. The GPS signal kept fading in and out, making the journey even more uncertain. The mountains loomed dark against the dying light, their jagged silhouettes a reminder of just how far from civilization I'd strayed. 40 miles to the nearest town might as well have been 400 out here. My load of consumer electronics wasn't time-sensitive, but this detour was eating into my schedule. The CB radio had been silent for hours, a sign of just how isolated this route was. Even the usual chatter of other truckers had faded away. leaving only the steady hum of my engine for company. By midnight, my eyelids were getting heavy. The mountain road had become a blur of endless switchbacks and steep grades. Safety first. That was always the golden rule of trucking. I'd passed a few official rest stops hours ago, all closed for renovation or damaged by the same storms that had flooded the main highway. The shoulder head looked wide enough to accommodate my rig without creating a hazard. I pulled over, the gravel crunching under my tires as I carefully positioned the truck. The spot was level enough for sleeping, though the trailer's air suspension would need adjusting. After running through my shutdown checklist and setting the brakes, I did one final walk-around inspection. The night was absolute. No moon, no stars, just the kind of darkness that makes you question whether light ever existed at all. After securing the truck, I climbed into my bunk, the familiar comfort of my sleeping space a stark contrast to the wild uncertainty outside. The silence was different here in the mountains. Thicker somehow, more alive. The only sound was the occasional settling of the truck's frame and the soft hiss of the air system maintaining pressure. My thoughts drifted to the cargo behind me, the trailer loaded with electronics worth more than I'd make in 5 years. Even out here, security was always on a trucker's mind. But the isolation that had concerned me earlier now seemed like protection. Who would look for trouble this far from anywhere? I set my phone alarm for 8 a.m., hoping to make up some time tomorrow. The red numbers on my clock read 11:43 p.m. as I drifted off to sleep. The sound infiltrated my dreams at first, a subtle metallic clicking that my sleeping brain tried to incorporate into some forgotten narrative. But as consciousness crept back, the sounds became more distinct. Someone or something was definitely outside my truck. The clock read 4:03 a.m. My heart rate picked up as I lay perfectly still listening. The noise was coming from the connection point between my cab and trailer, mere inches from where my head rested. The air and power lines were being manipulated, creating a distinct rustling and clicking sound. Years of trucking had taught me to recognize every normal sound my rig could make. This wasn't one of them. Before I could decide what to do, a new sound joined the first. The unmistakable thud of weight landing on my truck's rear landing. The whole cab shook with the impact. Whatever was back there had to be substantial. My mind raced through possibilities. Bear, mountain lion, or worse, human intruders. The landing creaked under the weight as whatever it was moved around. My hand instinctively reached for the flashlight I always kept within reach, but I hesitated. If it was a wild animal, light might startle it into aggression. If it was human, I'd lose the advantage of surprise. The movement continued, methodical rather than random. This wasn't an animal exploring, this was purposeful. In that moment, I made a choice. If something was going to happen, it would be on my terms. I balled my fist and, summoning all my strength, slammed it against the cab wall. The impact sent a thunderous boom echoing through the night. What happened next was chaos. A male scream pierced the darkness, definitely human, followed by the sound of a body tumbling off my truck. Then, like a horror movie come to life, voices erupted from all around my vehicle. Multiple voices, all male, all shouting in controlled but urgent tones. My blood ran cold. I wasn't dealing with one intruder, I was surrounded. Adrenaline pumping, I scrambled into the driver's seat. My hands found the light switches by muscle memory, and suddenly, the night exploded into clarity as my high beams cut through the darkness. What they revealed was both surreal and oddly familiar. Scattered around my truck were soldiers in full combat gear, their faces painted in camouflage patterns. Some were frozen mid-movement. Others were helping up their fallen comrade who was still rubbing his backside from the fall. Their military bearing was unmistakable. This wasn't some random group of troublemakers. My years in the service came flooding back. The tactical formations, the night operation setup, the coordinated movements. This was clearly a training exercise gone sideways. "Hold your positions," a voice commanded from somewhere in the darkness. A sergeant emerged from the shadows, his rank visible on his combat uniform. He approached my truck with practiced caution, hand raised in a non-threatening gesture. I rolled down my window, the cool mountain air rushing in. "Evening, Sergeant," I called out, deliberately using proper military courtesy. "Former Army here. Want to tell me why your troops are playing with my rig?" The sergeant's professional demeanor cracked slightly, replaced by a mix of embarrassment and relief at my military background. "Sir, We appear to have had a significant case of mistaken identity. As the sergeant explained, the pieces fell into place. Their training scenario involved locating and securing an abandoned truck, a staged vehicle positioned 3 miles back down the road. My unexpected presence had thrown a wrench into their carefully planned exercise. The soldiers had approached my truck using their trained procedures, assuming it was their target vehicle. They were checking the air and power lines as part of their security sweep, and the soldier who'd fallen was attempting to gain access to the trailer as per their mission parameters. The whole situation would have been funny if it hadn't been so potentially dangerous. Sierra Actual. This is Sierra 3, the sergeant spoke into his radio. We have a situation here. He proceeded to explain my presence to his commanding officer, maintaining his professionalism despite the obvious embarrassment of the situation. The radio crackled with the CO's response, a mix of concern and controlled frustration evident in his voice. Orders were quickly modified. My truck was to be marked as a civilian vehicle and left undisturbed. Other training elements in the area needed to be notified to prevent any similar confusion. Standing there in the pre-dawn darkness, surrounded by apologetic soldiers, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony of the situation. As the initial tension dissolved, a familiar camaraderie emerged. The soldiers gathered around, their earlier tactical precision replaced by relaxed curiosity. We swapped service stories, me about my time in the military, them about their current training missions. The soldier who'd fallen, a young specialist named Martinez, turned out to be fine, except for a bruised ego. "Sir," he said, still rubbing his back, "that wall slam was one hell of a counterattack." His fellow soldiers couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing off the mountain walls. The night had transformed from a potential threat to an impromptu reunion of sorts. The kind of unexpected brotherhood that only military service past or present could create. The sergeant, whose name was Thompson, gave me a quick rundown of their training operation. They were part of an Army Reserve unit conducting annual field exercises, focusing on night operations and vehicle interdiction. The mountain routes provided perfect terrain for their scenarios. "We've got 3 other teams out here," Thompson explained, all looking for that other truck. Speaking of which, he keyed his radio again, this time to warn the other units about my presence. No need for another surprise encounter. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Their practice mission had accidentally turned into a real-world lesson about expecting the unexpected. As we talked, the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. The mountains slowly emerged from darkness, their massive forms taking shape against the brightening horizon. The soldiers looked different in the growing light, younger, more human, without the mysterious shroud of night. Several of them were truckers themselves in civilian life, and we found ourselves discussing routes, regulations, and the changes in the industry. The conversation shifted naturally between military jargon and trucker talk, 2 worlds blending seamlessly in the mountain morning. The whole scene would have seemed bizarre to any passing motorist. An 18-wheeler surrounded by combat-ready soldiers, all engaged in casual conversation like it was the most natural thing in the world. As the unit prepared to move out, we reflected on the night's events. For the soldiers, it was a valuable lesson in civilian interaction and the importance of proper target verification. For me, it was a reminder that not every unusual situation was a threat, even if it seemed that way at first. Thompson said. "We train for all sorts of scenarios, but sometimes reality throws you something no training manual could prepare you for." He gestured at my truck. "This'll definitely make it into our after-action report." The young soldiers were already discussing how they'd tell the story back at their unit, each version getting slightly more dramatic in the retelling. With their training schedule behind them, the unit needed to move out. They formed up with practiced efficiency, transforming back into the professional military unit they were. Before leaving, Thompson made sure I had their unit's contact information, just in case any questions came up about the incident. "Drive safe, sir," he said, offering a crisp salute that I returned out of the old habit. The soldiers moved out in formation, disappearing into the underbrush as smoothly as they had appeared. Within minutes, the only evidence of their presence was the disturbed gravel around my truck. I watched them go, thinking about how different the story could have ended if either side had reacted differently. The mountains still stand silent, holding countless untold stories of truckers and soldiers, of midnight encounters and misunderstandings turned to memories. And somewhere out there, I'm sure there's a group of Army reservists who still talk about the night they tried to capture a truck and got the surprise of their lives instead.